I'm Jenny, and today you and I are going to spend some real quality time together exploring something that I know so many of you care about deeply, which is how to learn English quickly, how to improve your listening, and how to move confidently towards that C1 level where you don't just understand English in an academic or test-taking sense, but where you actually live inside the language and feel comfortable using it in any real situation, whether it's study, work, travel, or just enjoying movies, podcasts, and books. Now I know that when we say learn English quickly, there is always a little voice inside us that says, wait, can it really be quick? Isn't English supposed to take years and years? And yes, of course, learning a language takes time and commitment. But the truth is that there are strategies, habits, and mindsets that can help you learn far faster than you may imagine. So in this session, I want you to imagine that we are sitting together. Maybe you have your headphones in, maybe you're doing the dishes or walking in the park, and I am speaking directly to you, guiding you step by step, not with boring rules or stiff textbook explanations, but with a friendly, natural, almost story-like flow, the way a friend or mentor would talk to you about something they really care about. So let's begin by talking about what C1 level really means, because a lot of learners hear those labels, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2, and they may not always fully understand what each stage represents. At the C1 level, you are expected to understand a wide range of demanding, longer texts, and you are able to express yourself fluently and spontaneously without much searching for words. You can use the language flexibly and effectively for social, academic, and professional purposes, and you can produce clear, well-structured, detailed text on complex subjects, showing controlled use of organizational patterns and cohesive devices. Now that's the official description, but what does it mean for you personally? It means that when you are listening to a podcast in English, you don't feel lost after every sentence. You can follow the argument, the jokes, the little cultural references. It means that when you are speaking, you can respond in real time without panicking or translating in your head. It means that English feels less like a school subject and more like a tool you actually own. But how do you get there quickly? That is the big question, and the answer begins with listening. Listening is the key that opens everything else, because the more you listen, the more naturally you absorb vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation, and rhythm. Think about how babies learn their first language. They listen for months and months before they ever say a word. They absorb the sounds, the patterns, the stress, and eventually the words flow out naturally. As adults, we don't have the same time or environment, but we can recreate the process by giving ourselves massive input. And massive input does not mean listening once a week for 20 minutes. It means surrounding yourself with English every day in many different forms so that your ears start to recognize the music of the language. Now I know that many learners say, but Jenny, when I listen to native speakers, they speak so fast, I can't catch anything. It's like a blur. And yes, that's normal at first. Think of it like going to the gym. The first time you try to lift a heavy weight, it feels impossible. Your muscles shake. You can barely move. But if you keep training consistently, your muscles grow, and what once felt impossible becomes easy. Listening is like that. At the beginning, you may only catch 1 or 2 words in a sentence, but if you keep exposing yourself, your brain will adapt and soon whole phrases, then whole sentences, will click into place. The trick is to stay patient and consistent, to not give up when it feels hard. Another important idea I want to share with you is that speed is not the enemy. Many learners try to slow everything down, using subtitles, using slowed down audio, And while that can help at the very beginning, you must also train with real natural speed because that is how people actually speak. Imagine training to run, but only ever practicing in slow motion. You would never be ready for a real race. So challenge yourself with podcasts, YouTube videos, and conversations that are at natural speed, even if at first you only understand half. Don't worry about understanding everything. Focus on catching the main idea, the mood, the tone. Over time, your ability to catch details will grow. Now, let's talk about how to build a daily routine around listening that will push you towards C1 level. You need to create an environment where English comes to you automatically without you having to make a big decision each time. For example, change your phone's language to English. Subscribe to podcasts that download automatically. Make playlists of English music that you actually enjoy. Follow English-speaking YouTubers who talk about topics you like, technology, cooking, travel, whatever excites you. That way, English becomes part of your daily entertainment, not just a study task. And when you listen, don't treat it like a test. You don't need to pause every 10 seconds to translate. Just listen, let the sound flow through you, and trust that your brain is storing patterns even if you don't notice it consciously. At the same time, active listening is also important. That means taking a short clip, maybe just 1 or 2 minutes, and really working with it. Listen once without subtitles. Listen again while reading the transcript if it's available. Then listen again without looking, trying to catch as much as possible. Repeat sentences out loud to copy the rhythm and pronunciation. This kind of deep practice trains your ear and your mouth at the same time, connecting listening and speaking. If you do this regularly, even just 15 minutes a day, your progress will speed up dramatically. And here's something many learners don't realize. Your emotional state while listening makes a huge difference. If you are stressed, tired, or frustrated, your brain blocks new information. But if you are relaxed, curious, and even playful, you absorb much faster. So find content that makes you smile or laugh or feel inspired. Maybe it's a stand-up comedy show. Maybe it's an inspiring TED Talk. Maybe it's a funny sitcom. When you laugh, when you feel joy, your brain releases chemicals that strengthen memory. So don't just study English, enjoy it. Let it become part of your personality. Now you may be wondering, what about grammar? What about vocabulary lists? What about the traditional study methods? Of course those have their place, but the secret is that listening can actually take care of most of them if you do it enough. When you listen a lot, grammar patterns start to feel natural. You may not even be able to explain the rule, but you will know instinctively what sounds right. That's how native speakers do it. They don't memorize grammar tables, they just hear correct patterns thousands of times. And vocabulary? Again, massive listening gives you repeated exposure to words and context, which is far more powerful than memorizing isolated lists. Of course, you can write down new words, make flashcards, review them, but the real magic is when you hear those words again and again in real use, because then they stick forever. So the first big guideline in our full journey towards C1 is, make listening the heart of your practice. Build a lifestyle where English audio surrounds you. Mix passive listening, background podcasts while cooking, music in the car, with active listening, focused practice with transcripts and repetition. Challenge yourself with real speed. Choose content that excites you emotionally. And trust that over time, your ears and brain will adapt in ways you may not even notice day to day, but one morning you will realize, wait, I just understood that whole episode without subtitles, and that will feel like magic. So now that we've really settled into the importance of listening and how it acts as the foundation for everything else, I want to move naturally into the other side of communication, which is speaking. Listening is where you absorb the music of the language, but speaking is where you play that music yourself. At the C1 level, speaking is not just about being able to say basic sentences. It is about expressing your ideas clearly, confidently, and with nuance. And I want to be very honest here. Speaking is often the skill that makes learners the most nervous, because unlike reading or listening, speaking is immediate. You cannot hide. You cannot pause forever. You have to produce sound in real time, and that can feel terrifying. But here's the good news. Fear is natural, and fear does not mean you are not ready. In fact, speaking even when you are afraid is one of the fastest ways to grow. Now, let's think about why speaking feels hard for so many learners. Often it's because they carry the weight of perfectionism. They think, if I open my mouth, I must sound like a native, I must be grammatically perfect, I must use advanced vocabulary. But that mindset kills fluency because you get trapped in your head, constantly judging yourself instead of focusing on communication. I want you to imagine a child learning their first language. Do they speak perfectly? Of course not. They make mistakes all the time, but they keep talking, and adults still understand them. Over time, with practice and feedback, they refine their speech. That's exactly how you should treat your English speaking journey. Allow yourself to be imperfect. Allow yourself to make mistakes, because those mistakes are the stepping stones to C1 fluency. One powerful technique for speaking practice is something I call shadow speaking. You may have heard it called shadowing, and it's exactly what it sounds like. You take a short audio or video clip, ideally with a transcript, and you repeat everything the speaker says at almost the same time, like their shadow. You don't wait until they finish the sentence. You try to keep up with their rhythm, their intonation, their speed. At first, this feels impossible. Your tongue trips, your brain gets overloaded, but if you keep at it day after day, it's like training your mouth to dance with English. And here's the magic. After weeks of shadowing, you will notice that your pronunciation, your speed, and your confidence improve dramatically because you are literally borrowing the patterns of native speakers until they become natural for you. Another method that I love to recommend is recording yourself. Many learners hate hearing their own voice, but recording is one of the most honest teachers you can have. When you speak and then listen back, you hear things you never noticed in the moment. Maybe your pronunciation of a certain sound is unclear. Maybe your sentences are too short. Maybe you repeat the same filler words like, or you know. By recording yourself regularly, even just for 2 minutes a day, you give yourself a mirror for progress. And don't just record randomly. Choose a topic, maybe something you did today, or an opinion about a movie, or a small summary of a news article, and then speak about it for a few minutes. Then listen back and notice 1 or 2 things you can improve. The key here is not to criticize yourself harshly, but to treat it like training. Every athlete reviews their performance. Every musician listens to recordings of their practice. You can do the same with English. Now, pronunciation. At C1 level, pronunciation is not about eliminating your accent completely. That is neither realistic nor necessary. It is about clarity and rhythm. People from all over the world speak English with different accents, and that diversity is part of the beauty of the language. What matters is whether people can understand you without strain. To achieve that, you need to focus on stress, intonation, and connected speech. English is a stress-timed language, which means that some syllables are longer and more emphasized while others are shorter and quicker. If you give equal weight to every word, you will sound robotic and harder to follow. But if you learn to stress the right words, the key nouns, the main verbs, the adjectives, you will sound more natural and easier to understand. Intonation is also crucial. English speakers naturally raise and lower their pitch to show emotions, questions, or emphasis. If you speak with flat intonation, listeners may find it difficult to catch your meaning. And then there's connected speech, the way words blend together in natural conversation. For example, going to often becomes gonna, want to becomes wanna, did you sounds like didja. Learning these patterns helps you both understand natives better and sound smoother when you speak. But how do you practice pronunciation in a way that sticks? One exercise I recommend is imitation. Pick a short clip from a movie, maybe just 30 seconds. Play it, pause, and then try to imitate every detail, the rhythm, the stress, the intonation, even the emotion. Don't just focus on the words, focus on the music of the voice. Then record yourself doing it and compare with the original. Over time, your ear will become sharper and your mouth will learn to reproduce the patterns. Another fun way is to sing along with English songs. Music exaggerates rhythm and intonation, so it's like a pronunciation gym in disguise. Now, let's talk about interaction, because speaking is not just about producing words, it's about connecting with people. At C1 level, you want to be able to hold real conversations that flow naturally, not just recite memorized lines. That means learning to listen actively, to respond in ways that keep the conversation alive, and to ask questions that show interest. Many learners fall into the trap of giving very short answers. Yes, no. Maybe because they are nervous. But real conversation is about expanding. If someone asks you, "Do you like coffee?" instead of just saying, "Yes," you could say, "Yes, I do. Actually, I drink it every morning, but I try not to have more than 2 cups because it makes me too energetic." That extra detail gives the conversation more fuel, and it makes you sound more natural. One trick I love is to use what I call the echo and add method. When someone says something, echo part of it, and then add your own idea. For example, if your friend says, "I went hiking last weekend," you can reply, "Oh, you went hiking? That sounds great. I haven't been hiking in months. Where did you go?" This technique shows that you are listening, and it helps you practice building longer responses. Another key to interaction is learning how to manage misunderstandings. Even at C1, you will sometimes miss a word or get confused. That's completely normal. The skill you need is not to panic, but to use strategies like, "Sorry, could you repeat that more slowly?" Or, "I didn't quite catch that, do you mean?" Or even paraphrasing what you think the person said to confirm. Native speakers do this all the time with each other, so it's not a weakness. It's a natural part of conversation. And here's something you may not expect. Silence is okay. Many learners feel they must fill every second with words, but natural conversation includes pauses. If you need a moment to think, just take a breath. Even say something like, "That's an interesting question. Let me think for a second." That buys you time and makes you sound thoughtful instead of nervous. I also want to encourage you to seek out real speaking opportunities, not just practice alone. If you live in a country where English is not spoken widely, you still have options. You can join online conversation groups, use language exchange apps, or even form your own study circle with friends who also want to practice. The internet has opened endless doors. And don't underestimate the value of talking to yourself. Yes, it sounds strange, but self-talk is powerful practice. Describe what you are doing while cooking, narrate your day in English, or practice explaining your thoughts out loud. This keeps your speaking muscles active, so when you do meet real conversation partners, you are ready. One of the biggest mindset shifts you need to reach C1 speaking is to stop focusing only on grammar accuracy and start focusing on communication effectiveness. Imagine two learners. One speaks slowly, carefully constructing perfect sentences, but with long pauses and hesitation. The other speaks quickly, making some grammar mistakes, but keeping the conversation lively and clear. Which one feels more fluent? Usually the second. Of course, we aim to reduce mistakes over time, but fluency is about flow, not perfection. Listeners care more about whether they understand you and whether you are engaging than about whether every verb tense is correct. So to summarize this part of our journey, not with a bullet list but in a natural recap, speaking at C1 level is about courage, practice, and interaction. You need to shadow and imitate to train your mouth, record yourself to hear your progress, and focus on stress, intonation, and connected speech for clarity. You need to expand your answers, ask good questions, and manage misunderstandings calmly. And above all, you need to shift from perfectionism to communication. When you do these things consistently, speaking stops being a source of anxiety and starts being a source of joy. And that joy is what will keep you practicing until you reach true fluency. Now that we've spent time building up our listening and speaking skills, it's the perfect moment to turn our attention to reading, because reading is one of the most powerful tools you can use on the journey to C1 level. People often underestimate how much reading can transform their language ability. They think of it as just sitting with a textbook or maybe forcing themselves through an article that feels too difficult. But reading, when done the right way, is not a chore. It's a gateway into the living language, into the ideas, cultures, and voices of English-speaking communities. And at C1 level, reading isn't only about recognizing words on the page. It's about developing the ability to process complex ideas, to understand nuance, and to see how language is used creatively in different contexts. So let me ask you this. How often do you read in English right now? For many learners, reading happens only in the classroom or when they are forced to do homework. Outside of that, they don't really touch English texts. And that's such a wasted opportunity because reading is like mental weightlifting for your vocabulary and comprehension. Every time you read, you are exposing yourself to new words, new sentence structures, new ways of expressing ideas. And the beauty is that reading gives you time. Unlike listening, where the words fly by in real time, reading allows you to pause, to go back, to look things up if you need. It's like language learning at your own speed. But not all reading is equal, and this is where many learners make a mistake. They think they must always read difficult academic texts or advanced novels to grow. That's like going to the gym and trying to lift the heaviest weight on your first day. You'll just get discouraged. The trick is to find a balance between challenge and enjoyment. If a text is so hard that you need to look up every other word, you will quickly burn out. On the other hand, if it's so easy that you never see anything new, you won't grow. The sweet spot is material that feels just a little above your current comfort zone, enough to stretch you, but still let you enjoy the story or the message. One strategy one always recommends is extensive reading, which simply means reading a lot without stopping to look up every word. The goal here is to get used to the flow of the language and to build reading speed. For this, you can choose graded readers, simplified versions of famous books, or even young adult novels, which often use clear but still engaging language. The idea is to read for pleasure, to let yourself get lost in the story while your brain absorbs patterns unconsciously. Extensive reading builds fluency, and fluency in reading translates into fluency in thinking, which then supports both writing and speaking. On the other side, we have intensive reading, where you slow down and really dig into the details. Maybe you take a short article or a page from a novel and you analyze it carefully. You look at new vocabulary, underline phrases that interest you, notice how sentences are structured. This kind of deep study helps you grow your precision and awareness of the language. So both extensive and intensive reading are necessary, and you can balance them in your routine. Maybe 20 minutes of fast reading for pleasure, then 10 minutes of careful study. Over time, both muscles grow stronger. Now, let's talk about vocabulary, because for many learners, vocabulary feels like the endless mountain they must climb. You learn one list, and then you realize there are thousands more words out there. How can you ever reach the top? Here's the secret. You don't need to know every word in English to be advanced. You just need to know the right ones and to know them deeply. By deeply, I mean not just knowing the dictionary definition, but understanding how the word is used, what collocations it appears in, what tone it carries. For example, the word challenge. You might know it means something difficult. But do you also know that we say rise to a challenge, face a challenging task? Do you know that it can be both a noun and a verb? This kind of depth makes your vocabulary truly usable. And how do you build vocabulary depth? Through context, and that's where reading shines. When you see a word multiple times in different sentences, your brain starts to map its meaning more accurately. That's why it's far more powerful to encounter a word naturally through reading than to just memorize it from a list. Of course, you can support this process with tools like flashcards or vocabulary notebooks. Many learners love apps that use spaced repetition, which means the app shows you words just before you are about to forget them. That's a scientifically proven way to strengthen memory. But the heart of vocabulary growth is still repeated exposure and context, and reading provides that better than anything else. Here's a technique you might try. When you read, don't look up every unknown word immediately. Instead, first guess from context. Ask yourself, what is happening in this sentence? What could this word mean? Then, after finishing the paragraph or the page, you can check a dictionary for the words you marked. This trains you to become a more independent reader, less dependent on translation. And when you do look words up, don't just read the definition. Look at example sentences, pay attention to collocations, maybe even write one or two of your own sentences with that word. That little extra effort makes the words stick. Now, let's consider the types of texts that will really challenge and develop your C1 skills. At this level, you want to move beyond simple dialogues or basic stories. You want to read essays, opinion articles, academic texts, maybe even literature that plays with language in creative ways. These kinds of texts expose you to complex ideas, advanced connectors, and subtle shades of meaning. For example, reading a newspaper editorial helps you see how arguments are built in English, how writers use phrases like, on the other hand, by contrast, it could be argued that. Reading a novel exposes you to descriptive language, dialogue, idioms, and cultural references. Each genre develops a different part of your English brain. And don't forget nonfiction books. Many learners focus only on stories, but nonfiction is a treasure chest for advanced learners. Books about psychology, history, science, or self-development are full of rich vocabulary and ideas, and they also give you content to talk about in conversations. Imagine being able to discuss a book you read about habits or a biography of a famous leader in English. That immediately makes you sound more fluent and knowledgeable. One of the skills you need to develop for C1 reading is skimming and scanning. Skimming means reading quickly to get the general idea, like when you look through a news article to understand the main points. Scanning means looking for specific information, like when you check a timetable for the right train time. These are real-world reading skills, and practicing them helps you use English in practical ways, not just academic ones. But here's the deeper goal: critical reading. At C1 level, it's not enough to just understand the surface meaning. You should also start to evaluate what you read. Ask yourself, what is the author's purpose? Do I agree or disagree? What evidence do they use? Are there cultural assumptions behind their words? This kind of thinking not only improves your English comprehension, but also makes you a more intelligent and independent thinker. And the beauty is that you can then bring these ideas into your speaking and writing, making your communication richer and more sophisticated. So let's step back for a moment and imagine your daily reading routine. Maybe in the morning, while drinking coffee, you skim through an English news site for 10 minutes just to catch up on headlines. Later in the day, you spend 20 minutes reading a novel you enjoy, letting yourself get lost in the story. In the evening, you might take one short article and study it intensively, marking new vocabulary and practicing sentences. This mix keeps reading both enjoyable and challenging. Over weeks and months, the amount of input you've collected will grow like a mountain, and your vocabulary and comprehension will rise with it. Remember, the most important thing is consistency. Reading a little every day is far more powerful than reading a lot once a week. Even 10 minutes daily builds the habit and keeps your brain in contact with English. And as your reading ability grows, you will notice that listening becomes easier too, because you recognize more words and structures. Your writing also improves because you see models of how ideas are expressed. Reading is like the secret fuel that powers all the other skills. So to bring this part together, reading at the C1 level is about much more than decoding text. It's about building a lifestyle where English reading is part of your daily life, choosing a balance of extensive and intensive reading, growing vocabulary through context, exploring different genres from novels to nonfiction, practicing skimming, scanning, and critical analysis, and above all, enjoying the journey. Because when you enjoy reading, you don't even feel like you are studying. You feel like you are simply living in the language. And that is the true path to mastering English quickly and deeply. Now that we've built up listening, speaking, and reading, it's time to move into the final core skill, which is writing. And I know writing can sometimes feel like the most academic, the most technical, and maybe even the most intimidating of all the skills. But in reality, writing is not about stiff rules and red corrections on a page. It's about expressing yourself clearly and persuasively in a way that connects with the reader. At the C1 level, writing becomes more than just putting words together. It becomes a craft. You're expected to organize ideas logically, to use advanced vocabulary and grammar naturally, and to adjust your style depending on the situation, whether that's writing an essay, a professional email, or even just a thoughtful message to a friend. And the wonderful thing is that writing doesn't have to be boring or stressful. It can actually be one of the most creative and empowering parts of your English journey if you approach it with the right mindset. So, let's think about what makes writing difficult for many learners. Often it's the fear of the blank page. You sit down, you want to write something, but your mind suddenly feels empty and you don't know where to start. This is perfectly normal. Even professional writers experience this every day. The trick is to understand that writing is a process, not a single act of perfection. You don't need to produce the perfect text in one try. You can brainstorm ideas, draft quickly without worrying too much about mistakes, and then revise to improve clarity and style. That's how real writers work, and you can adopt the same process for your English writing. At C1 level, structure is one of the key things you need to master. Structure means how you organize your thoughts so that the reader can follow you easily. If your ideas jump around without order, the reader gets lost, and no matter how good your vocabulary is, your message doesn't land. A simple but powerful structure is the classic introduction, body, and conclusion. In the introduction, you present your main idea or thesis. In the body, you develop it with supporting points, examples, or evidence. In the conclusion, you summarize and maybe give a final thought. This works for essays, reports, or even longer emails. But beyond this basic pattern, at C1 you also need to use transitions and connectors smoothly, phrases like on the other hand, in contrast, as a result, moreover. These words act like bridges that guide the reader through your ideas, making your writing feel coherent and professional. Another important aspect of writing at this level is style. Style means the choices you make in tone, vocabulary, and sentence length depending on your audience. If you are writing a formal report, you want to use precise, objective language, avoiding slang or contractions. If you are writing a blog post or a personal letter, you can be more relaxed, use idioms, or even humor. Being able to shift between styles is a hallmark of advanced writing. Think of it like clothing. You wouldn't wear the same outfit to a business meeting as you would to a party with friends. In the same way, you adjust your writing style to fit the situation. Now, let's talk about vocabulary in writing. At C1 level, you want to avoid two extremes, being too simple or being too artificial. Some learners stay in their comfort zone, using only basic words like good, bad, big, small. Others try too hard, stuffing their writing with rare, complicated words they barely understand. The goal is to use precise, natural vocabulary that fits the context. Instead of good, maybe you write effective, beneficial, or positive, depending on what you mean. Instead of bad, maybe you use harmful, ineffective, or problematic. But you don't need to reach for the longest word in the dictionary. Clarity is always more important than showing off. In fact, the best writing at C1 level is clear, direct, and elegant, not overly complicated. Another key to advanced writing is variety in sentence structure. If all your sentences are short and simple, your writing will feel flat. If all your sentences are long and complex, your writing will feel heavy. The secret is to mix them. Use short sentences for impact and longer sentences to develop ideas. For example, you might write, "Learning English is challenging, but it is also rewarding because it opens doors to education, travel, and career opportunities that would otherwise remain closed." Here you see short and long sentences working together. This variety makes your writing more engaging and easier to read. One technique I highly recommend is learning from models. Just as we use shadowing for speaking, we can use imitation for writing. Find a well-written article, essay, or even a professional email and analyze how it is built. Look at the introduction. Notice how the writer transitions between ideas. Pay attention to the vocabulary choices. Then, try writing something of your own on a similar topic, borrowing the structure, but using your own words. This way you are not copying, but learning the rhythm of good writing. Over time, those patterns will become part of your natural style. Now, you might be wondering, how can I actually practice writing consistently? After all, it's not like speaking where you can just talk to yourself or listening where you can put on headphones. Writing requires a bit more intention. But the good news is you can create simple daily habits. One of my favorites is journaling in English. Each day, spend 5 minutes writing about what happened in your life, how you felt, what you were planning. Don't worry about mistakes. The goal is to make writing as natural as thinking. Another practice is writing summaries of things you read or listen to. If you read an article or watch a video, write a short summary in your own words. This helps you process the information and reinforces vocabulary. You can also write responses. If you read an opinion piece, write whether you agree or disagree and why. These small practices keep your writing muscles active. And if you want to push yourself further, try publishing your writing somewhere. It doesn't have to be a professional magazine. Even posting on social media in English, writing blog entries, or participating in online forums can give you valuable practice and even feedback. The act of knowing that someone else might read your words often makes you more careful and thoughtful, and over time, your confidence grows. Now, let's not forget editing, because editing is where good writing becomes great writing. After you write a draft, take a break, then read it again with fresh eyes. Look for sentences that are too long or confusing. Check whether your ideas flow logically. Replace vague words with more precise ones. Fix grammar mistakes, of course, but also look for style improvements. Editing is like polishing a diamond. It's where your writing shines. At first, editing may feel slow, but with practice, you'll start to self-correct even while drafting. Another advanced skill at C1 is being able to argue a point clearly. Many academic and professional tasks require you to present an opinion and defend it. To do this well, you need to structure your argument logically. Start with a clear statement of your position. Then give reasons and examples. Anticipate counterarguments and address them. Finally, conclude strongly. For example, if you are writing about whether students should be required to wear uniforms, you might start with, "I believe school uniforms should be mandatory because they promote equality and reduce distractions." Then you support with evidence, acknowledge that some people disagree, and explain why your view still stands. This kind of clear argumentation is exactly what examiners and employers look for at advanced levels. But writing isn't just academic, it can also be creative, and this is where you can really enjoy yourself. Try writing short stories, dialogues, or even poems in English. Creativity forces you to play with the language, to stretch beyond the usual phrases, and it helps you internalize vocabulary in a deeper way. Plus, it's fun. Imagine inventing a character and describing their adventures, all in English. Not only will your writing improve, but your speaking will too, because you'll practice thinking in more imaginative ways. Let me also say a word about grammar in writing. At C1 level, grammar mistakes should be fewer, but they will still happen. Instead of obsessing over tiny errors, focus on the patterns that matter most for clarity, such as verb tense consistency, subject-verb agreement, and sentence boundaries. A misplaced comma or article is not the end of the world. What matters is whether your reader can follow your meaning without confusion. And over time, the more you read and write, the more naturally correct grammar will come to you. So, how do we bring all of this together into a writing practice that truly moves you towards C1 quickly? Start with small, daily habits like journaling and summaries. Learn from models by analyzing and imitating well-written texts. Practice writing in different styles and for different audiences. Edit your work to improve clarity and style. Experiment with both argumentation and creativity. And above all, write consistently. Even 5 minutes a day is better than nothing because writing is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it becomes. If you do this, you will find that writing stops being a scary academic exercise and starts becoming a tool you can use with confidence. Whether it's for exams, for work, or for personal expression, you will have the power to put your thoughts into words clearly, persuasively, and beautifully. And that is one of the greatest signs of true C1 mastery. So now that we've looked at listening, speaking, reading, and writing, it's time to zoom out a little and talk about something even bigger, the strategies and the mindset that hold all of these skills together. Because here's the truth. You can have the best materials in the world, the best grammar book, the best podcasts, the best teacher, but if your mindset isn't right and if your strategy isn't clear, your progress will always feel slow, inconsistent, and frustrating. On the other hand, if you develop the right habits, the right way of thinking, and a strategy that fits your life, you can move towards C1 level much faster than you ever imagined. So in this part, I want you to think of me as your coach, helping you not just with the language itself, but with the way you approach learning. The first thing we need to talk about is consistency. Consistency is the magic ingredient that separates people who succeed from people who quit. Many learners get very excited at the beginning. They study for 3 hours one day. They watch 10 videos. They make 20 pages of notes. But then they get tired, life gets busy, and the next day they do nothing. Then nothing the day after. Slowly the motivation fades and they stop. I don't want that for you. What I want for you is steady, sustainable practice. Even 15 minutes a day is better than 3 hours once a week. Think of it like brushing your teeth. You don't wait until Sunday to brush them for 2 hours. You brush them every day for a few minutes, and that's what keeps them healthy. Your English practice should be the same, small but regular. Now, consistency is not just about discipline, it's also about design. You need to design your environment in a way that makes English automatic. If you rely only on willpower, you will always struggle because willpower runs out. But if you design your life so that English is naturally around you, you don't even need to think about it. For example, change the language of your phone and your apps to English. Subscribe to podcasts so they download automatically. Keep an English book on your nightstand so it's the first thing you see before bed. Make your YouTube recommendations show English channels. These little design choices mean that English comes to you without effort, and that's what keeps you consistent. Another huge factor is motivation, and motivation is tricky because it rises and falls. Some days you feel inspired, other days you feel lazy. That's normal. The secret is not to depend on motivation. Instead, you need discipline and habits to carry you through the low days. But you can also feed your motivation by reminding yourself why you are learning. Maybe it's for your career, maybe it's for study abroad, maybe it's to connect with people, or maybe it's just for the joy of being bilingual. Whatever your reason, write it down, put it on a sticky note on your desk. Remind yourself often. The stronger your why, the easier it is to keep going. Now, let's talk about mindset, because this is where many learners block themselves. They say things like, I'm too old, I'm not talented, I'll never sound like a native. These are limiting beliefs, and they are not true. Science shows that adults can learn languages very effectively, sometimes even faster than children because they have better strategies and discipline. You don't need to be a genius. You don't need some special talent. You just need consistent practice and the right approach. And you don't need to sound exactly like a native speaker. At C1 level, the goal is to be clear, fluent, and confident, not perfect. English is a global language, spoken by billions of people with different accents. Your voice, your accent, is part of who you are, and it's valuable. So let go of perfectionism and embrace progress. Another mindset shift I want you to adopt is to see mistakes not as failures, but as feedback. Many learners fear mistakes so much that they avoid speaking, avoid writing, avoid taking risks. But mistakes are the best teachers. Every mistake shows you where you can improve. Think of a child learning to walk. They fall hundreds of times, but each fall teaches them balance, and eventually they walk without thinking. If they stopped after the first fall, they would never walk. The same is true for you with English. Each mistake is simply one step closer to fluency. So instead of saying, "Oh no, I made a mistake," say, "Great, I learned something." Let's also talk about goals, because without goals, it's hard to measure progress. But goals should be realistic and specific. Don't just say, "I want to be fluent." That's too vague. Instead, set goals like, "I will listen to one English podcast every day for the next month," or "I will write one journal entry in English 5 times a week," or "I will learn 10 new words and use them in sentences this week." These are clear, actionable goals you can track. And when you achieve them, you feel motivated to keep going. Then every few months, you can look back and see how far you've come. That feeling of progress is very powerful. One strategy that really helps is habit stacking. Habit stacking means connecting a new habit to an existing one. For example, if you already drink coffee every morning, you can make it a habit to listen to an English podcast while drinking your coffee. If you already scroll your phone before bed, replace 5 minutes of that with reading an English article. By attaching English practice to habits you already have, you make it automatic, and that's what makes it stick. Another important piece is balance. Many learners spend all their time on one skill. Maybe they only focus on grammar exercises, or only watch videos, or only memorize vocabulary lists. But language is a system, and all the skills feed each other. Listening helps speaking, reading helps writing, writing reinforces grammar, and speaking strengthens vocabulary. So your strategy should include a mix of activities. It doesn't have to be perfectly balanced every day, but over the course of a week, try to touch all 4 skills. That way, you grow in a rounded way. Let's also address one common challenge: time. Many people say, "I don't have time to study English." But often, the real issue is not time but priority. Everyone has small pockets of time in the day. Maybe while commuting, cooking, exercising, or waiting in line. Those moments can become study opportunities if you use them wisely. 5 minutes of listening here, 10 minutes of reading there. It all adds up. You don't need huge blocks of time. You just need to use the little moments consistently. Now, let's talk about active versus passive learning. Passive learning is when you just expose yourself to English without much effort, like listening to music in the background. Active learning is when you focus, take notes, repeat, practice. Both are important. Passive learning helps you absorb the language naturally and keeps it around you, while active learning pushes your skills forward. The best strategy is to combine them. Maybe you do passive listening while walking, then active practice with a transcript later. Or you read casually for fun, then write a short summary to make it active. This balance makes your practice both enjoyable and effective. Another mindset that will help you is curiosity. Instead of treating English like a school subject you must pass, treat it like a mystery to explore. When you hear a new expression, get curious. What does it mean? How is it used? Where did it come from? When you read something confusing, instead of getting frustrated, think of it as a puzzle. This curiosity transforms learning from a burden into a game, and games are much easier to keep playing. And I want to remind you that progress is not always visible day to day. Sometimes you feel like you're stuck, like you're not improving. But language learning is like growing a tree. You water it every day, but you don't see the tree grow overnight. One day, after months, you suddenly notice it's taller. The same with English. You may not notice improvement each day, but if you stay consistent, one day you will surprise yourself with how much you understand and how well you can speak. Finally, I want to talk about community. Learning alone is possible, but learning with others is powerful. When you join a group, whether online or in person, you get encouragement, accountability, and opportunities to practice. You realize you are not alone, and that keeps you motivated. So find a community, maybe a study partner, maybe a conversation club, maybe an online course. Surround yourself with people who share your goals, and you will find it much easier to stay consistent. So, to bring this all together, your strategy for learning English quickly at the C1 level is not about studying harder for 1 week and then stopping. It's about building small, consistent habits, designing your environment so English surrounds you, setting realistic goals, embracing mistakes as part of the journey, and keeping your curiosity alive. It's about balancing passive and active learning, finding time in small moments, and connecting with the community. And above all, it's about having the right mindset, that you can improve, that progress is possible, and that every small step matters. If you hold on to this mindset and follow these strategies, you will not only learn English faster, but also enjoy the process much more. And when you enjoy it, you'll never want to stop, and that is the secret to true fluency. So here we are, at the final part of this full guideline, and I want to take you beyond textbooks, beyond exercises, into something even more powerful: immersion. Because at the end of the day, language is not just a subject you study, it's a living tool you use. And the fastest way to make English feel natural is to live with it, surround yourself with it, and bring it into your everyday life. That's what immersion is all about. Don't worry, I'm not saying you need to pack your bags and move to London or New York tomorrow. Immersion is possible right where you are if you know how to create it. So, what does immersion mean? It means that English stops being just a thing you study for 1 hour a day and starts being the environment around you all the time. Think of how children learn their first language. They don't sit with grammar books. They simply live in the language every day. They hear it, see it, try it, make mistakes, and slowly it becomes natural. You can do the same thing with English, no matter your age or location, if you consciously surround yourself with it. Let's begin with your digital world. Most of us spend hours on our phones every day, scrolling, texting, watching videos. So, why not make that time work for your English? Change the language settings on your phone, your apps, and your social media to English. At first, it might feel strange, but soon your brain will adapt, and you'll pick up vocabulary naturally. Follow English-speaking creators on Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube, especially in topics you already enjoy. If you love cooking, follow chefs who speak English. If you love technology, follow English tech channels. This way, you combine your hobbies with your language learning, and that keeps it fun. Now, let's talk about entertainment. Movies, TV shows, and YouTube videos are amazing immersion tools. But don't just watch passively, watch actively. Start with English subtitles if you need them, but try to wean yourself off slowly, maybe watching with subtitles one time, and then without the next. Pause sometimes to repeat a phrase, mimic the pronunciation, or write down a useful expression. You'll be surprised how many natural phrases you can collect this way. And if you watch the same movie or show more than once, the second or third time becomes a language lesson because you already know the story, so you can focus on the language itself. Music is another powerful tool. Songs stick in our heads in a way that vocabulary lists never do. So create playlists of English music you enjoy, listen often, and sing along. Don't worry about sounding perfect. Just let the rhythm and the sounds get into your mouth and ears. Music helps you internalize pronunciation, rhythm, and even grammar patterns without effort. But immersion isn't only digital. You can create physical immersion too. Label objects around your house with their English names: mirror, fridge, door, light switch. It may feel childish, but it works. Keep English books or magazines where you normally relax, so picking one up becomes natural. Write your grocery list in English, your daily to-do list in English, even little sticky notes of reminders in English. The more you use English for daily tasks, the more it becomes part of your thinking. Speaking of thinking, one of the most powerful immersion techniques is self-talk. Yes, it might feel silly at first, but it's incredibly effective. Narrate your day in English, what you're doing, what you're planning, how you're feeling. For example, when cooking, say to yourself, "I'm chopping the onions. Now I'm heating the pan." When walking, think, "It's a sunny day. I need to hurry because I'm late." This trains your brain to form sentences quickly, without translation. Over time, your inner voice starts to use English more and more, and that's when fluency really accelerates. Now, let's go further into real-life application. At C1 level, your goal is not just understanding English, but using it confidently in conversations, writing, and even professional situations. So find ways to actually interact with people. If you have English-speaking friends, make an agreement to speak only in English when you're together. If you don't, find language exchange partners online. There are so many apps and communities where people are eager to practice. You can teach them your language and they can help you with English. Even just 15 minutes of real conversation practice a few times a week will skyrocket your fluency. Another way to apply English is through creative projects. For example, start a blog in English. Even if nobody reads it, it's a space for you to practice writing. Or keep a video diary in English where you record yourself speaking about your day. This not only practices language, but also builds confidence and shows you your progress over time. If you enjoy social media, why not create English content around your hobbies? It doesn't have to be perfect. It's practice, and practice is what matters. Let's also talk about travel, because if you ever get the chance, even a short trip to an English-speaking country can give you a huge boost. But remember, immersion doesn't only happen abroad. You can find English-speaking communities in your own city, international meetups, cultural events, volunteer groups. The key is to put yourself in situations where English is the natural choice for communication. Another powerful immersion strategy is goal-based immersion. For example, set yourself the goal of passing an English exam, or giving a presentation in English, or reading a full book without translation. These kinds of goals push you to immerse yourself more deeply because you have something specific to prepare for. And the sense of achievement you feel when you reach the goal will motivate you to keep going. Now, let's bring all of this together. Think of your English journey as building a lifestyle, not just following a course. You wake up and listen to a podcast while brushing your teeth. You check your phone and see English notifications. You write your grocery list in English. You watch a TV show in English in the evening. You talk to yourself in English while cooking. You join a language exchange on the weekend. None of these activities alone feels overwhelming, but together, they create an environment where English surrounds you. And in that environment, your brain has no choice but to adapt. That's when English becomes not just something you learn, but something you live. And here's the beautiful thing. When you live the language, progress becomes faster, easier, and more natural. You stop asking, "When will I be fluent?" because you suddenly realize you already are using English fluently in your daily life. You stop worrying about mistakes because you're too busy communicating. You stop feeling bored because English is connected to your real interests and passions. That's the magic of immersion, and that's the final piece of this full guideline. So, my friend, let me leave you with this. Learning English to the C1 level is not about a shortcut or a secret trick. It's about building a consistent habit, practicing all 4 skills, adopting the right mindset, and creating immersion in your daily life. It's about enjoying the process, celebrating small victories, and remembering that every step forward counts. You already have the ability inside you. It's just a matter of practice, patience, and persistence. And if you follow everything we've talked about in this full guideline, listening, speaking, reading, writing, strategies, mindset, and immersion, you will not only learn English quickly, but you will learn it deeply. You will reach the level where English feels natural, where you can express yourself confidently, where you can think, dream, and create in this language. And that, to me, is the true meaning of fluency. Thank you for joining me on this journey here on English Lab. I'm Jenny, and it has been such a joy to guide you through these steps. Remember, you are not just learning English, you are opening doors to the world. Keep going, stay consistent, and I promise you will get there. I believe in you.